Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Tech in Motion with Cascade Media. Today, we will be discussing the Colonial pipeline ransomware event that recently took place over the last couple of days. I am your host for today's conversation, Aaron Brooks, and with me, I have two of my favorite security guys that I know, Mr. Harrison May and Mark Bailey. Some of you may remember Mark from the last video that we posted. Mark, did you want to give a super quick introduction or reintroduction to yourself to the Tech in Motion audience, please?
Sure, yeah. My name is Mark Bailey. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity for the University of Kansas Health System. We're a hospital system in the Kansas City area. We have about 120 locations, and we have 18,000 users that we protect, about a million patients annually, whose records that we're charged to keep. So,
awesome. And then Mr. Harrison May, quick introduction to yourself, sir, reintroduction.
Yeah, I'm Harrison May. I'm gonna get my title from being the board president and director of technology at W.B. Dubois Learning Center. I do have a career. That's what I do for volunteer. But my security, I'm an information security architect. Unfortunately, my company doesn't like for me to tell where I work for because they're very sensitive about being views, being these type of discussion be attributed to me or the W. Du Bois Learning Center, not them. So that's
Right.
it.
Appreciate it. So, gentlemen, again, every morning, every evening when we turn on the news, we hear something about, ransomware attack and something about Colonial, something about a pipeline and people rushing to gas stations and, are these guys going to pay? And, you just hear all this information. And so I thought it would be great to get specifically you two together to get your opinion, and we'll talk about kind of the impact of what ransomware has had on this particular company and then in general. And then from there, we just kind of see where the conversation goes. Okay. But I'm definitely looking forward to getting into it. So I think my first question will be with regards to the ransomware attack. When I think about this, several words kind of jump out to me, and I think the one that everybody is most familiar with is impact, right? When an organization is hit with ransomware, the impact is great, really no matter the size of the organization, right? Data gets, we'll call it, locked up, inaccessible to the organization, and hence to the word ransomware. The attackers, they want payment. Pay me to unlock your data. I won't share what I have. I won't tell what I know. Pay me, and then everybody can be happy. But the other side of the impact is huge. So in this case, the whole pipeline, right? One of their countermeasures or ways of isolating, which we'll get into, was to basically shut down the network, right? We're not flowing any more gas, which affected the entire East Coast. You have government resources, local resources, state resources, employee resources. I think you guys get where I'm going with this, right? So it's definitely more than just shutting a computer system down. It can be life altering to some and definitely have an impact on the economy. And in our case, almost half of a nation. So when it comes to impact, what are some of you, when I'll start with you, Harrison, when it comes to impact of an organization, what are some of the things that you strive to achieve to minimize impact of ransomware for an organization?
Yeah. So ransomware is just at the end of the day, it's about money, right? People heard a comment the other day, why do bank robbers rob banks? That's where the money is. So ransomware, it's all about trying to get money. And if you look at how it's morphed since it first came into play, they're very targeted for people they think they're pay. So if we disrupt your service, the impact to your business, right? Why do you have technology? You need it for your business. So if you shut it down and you can't get to the data, how much are you willing to pay for it? So there's targeted industries that are concerned that, schools are prime candidates with the healthcare systems and things like that. Those are going to be a lot of the places that the bad guys realize that those people have been motivated to pay to get their services back online. I mean, the countermeasure, I know we're going to talk about that later on, but the stated message directors don't pay. That's easier said than done. I mean, I want to say that just don't pay them, they won't do it anymore. Yeah, but what am I supposed to do? I looked at studies that right now we're looking about 21 days from ransomware attacks occurring to people getting business up back to where you're really online, but there's always concern that they left some fingerprints behind where they can still continue do whatever. But that said, Aaron, I kind of rambling at the watch. I want to make sure that I keep answering to your the question on there. But as far as for the impact that I think that was the question you were asking.
What are some of your ways that you would like, what are technologies, processes that you like to implement to minimize the impact ransomware could have on an organization?
So thanks for getting back and bring me in, because I'll go off and for one thought process leads to another. So, but countermeasure. I mean, the biggest challenge right now is it's so easy to get into. See, I'm gonna go ramble a little bit, but we changed the whole infrastructure security principle from putting a hard and crunchy exterior to keep the bad guys out, to now our new model is the zero trust model, where you have to assume everybody's in. Why? Because in order for our users to work, they want to get to the internet, they want to read mail, and unfortunately, if you're dealing with mail, then it's so easy to click on something that gets embedded link that's such that I don't own your machine and can do whatever I want with it, and that's what's happening. That's the countermeasure. How do you protect users from shooting themselves in the foot because they want to get out on the internet and do things? The resource is supposed to be for whatever organization to work for, but at the end of the day, the users could treat their work resources, their computer. Why can I do everything I want? Why can't I go to Facebook and do all those things? So as far as countermeasures for ransomware, you got to get the users kind of like a human firewall with understanding the implications of the actions that occurs. And that means training them and let them know that this is why we don't do Facebook here. This is why you do that outside emails or things like that. So it's the biggest countermeasure is to track the user's responsibility. You got to do more and more training. The lesson implications. That said, the zero trust model is that they're going to do something, stuff's going to get in. So that means that you now have to have controls in place on your network to look for odd hate behavior that you can have now to see that someone's actually doing something. So your data sources and I'm gonna stop here. I gave enough. I'll ramble and I'll go on. Did I get more what you asked, Aaron?
No, absolutely. And then Mark, I saw that you were nodding your head in an agreement there. I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to add to it, but my question to you would be, obviously people, the one control that you can't control, right? The one thing, data source you can't control, right? Outside of that though, what are some of the maybe technologies that you feel are maybe most effective when it comes to countermeasuring? For an example, email filtering, like Harrison's mentioned, some type of detection tool. What do you think in your experience has been the most effective or will be the most effective to try to become notified of a ransomware attack?
Sure. So first things first, I want to start with a little bit of threat modeling. There's really two threats that ransomware comes by. Number one is an advanced persistent threat, which is going to be like a nation state actor, country or government backed sponsoring. and those are extremely difficult to protect against. If an APT is going against you, that's a whole different discussion. But I'd probably like to focus my response a little bit more on those low-hanging fruit type attacks, where you have some kind of an actor who just spreads malware everywhere, and it's going to plink off the firewall of 99% of companies, but there's always that 1% who doesn't have the defenses or is not following security best practices. And for a lot of those, we employ defense in depth or layered defenses strategies.
Mhm.
So step one for us is we run a weekly phishing campaign where we send out our own phishing messages, and if people click, we correct them and send them back through phishing school, if you will, and say, hey, don't do that. Here's why. But we also build our security defenses based upon the assumption that somebody's going to click somewhere. We have a lot of users and a lot of organizations. Any enterprise organization, you got 5, 10, 20,000 users. Somebody's going to click on that email. So if we assume they're going to click, there's a couple of other steps, and this is where the defense in depth really comes into play. So if we train everyone to not click, great. But if somebody clicks, we have secure email gateways, which will strip out the links. They'll kind of say, hey, wait a minute, are you sure you want to click on that? Maybe it'll sandbox the link. Some of them will rip out the attachments, or they'll kind of check the links for you. So that's another way that'll strip out a lot of those. But if that fails, we still have firewalls. So the way a lot of ransomware works is it attempts to download a cradle, and that cradle should kind of hit the firewall, and firewall should say, hey, wait a minute, this looks like a malware download cradle. Maybe we should stop that. But if that doesn't work, the cradle is going to reach out to something via DNS. So we should have DNS filtering in place, or we do, and I think most mature security organizations have DNS filtering in place and say, wait a minute, you're trying to download from a URL that just popped up in Amazon an hour ago. That looks a little fishy. So it should block the DNS request. But let's say that it gets past the download cradle. You actually, somebody clicks and downloads the download cradle. It reaches out to a DNS, and then it downloads the secondary payload, which would be the actual ransomware itself. And it goes through all of those things. We still should have a good endpoint detection and response tool. CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, McAfee, whatever. There's probably 30 of them out there. And I'm not recommending any of them, just something where this kind of like you're either traditional antivirus, legacy antivirus would stop it, but really next gen antivirus is what really helps. And it would catch it when it starts that payload transfer. So that would be kind of the final line of defense. But even if all of those things fail, you always want to set up a lot of protocol blockings, like outbound 22 should be turned off except for with specific instances. You always want to make sure SMB traffic, and there's all kinds of different protocols. I don't want to go too deep in the technical aspects, but there should be certain types of monitoring, tracking your lateral movement and tracking your network activity. So with the idea of the defense in depth strategy, you really, if any one of those layers fail, you can still protect your environment. But that's why you can never rely on a single point of failure in cybersecurity. You have to have multiple stack technologies working together to really make sure that you have a really well fortified approach there.
No, absolutely, and I appreciate that. So we had talked about defensive depth. We talk about training. It's all measures or tools that we can use to try to prevent ransomware from happening, right? But as both of you alluded to, it almost feels more of a, not if but when type of scenario, right? So when it does happen, how important, and I'll swing this over to you, Harrison, is the concept of isolation. So once the ransomware is detected, obviously you have to do some type of containment. You have to keep it from spreading, right? So Harrison, what are some of the best practices that you would recommend or feel will be effective for an organization who says, oh crap, McAfee says I have malware. What do I do? How do I stop this thing from spreading more?
Yeah, so it's going to be based on the company, because they're going to all have a different risk tolerance, right? Mm-hmm. Priority of getting back up to business, whatever business should be. That said, that the mentioned the best thing you can do is to be proactive, not reactive. Mm-hmm. Said I did work for one company before. They told me they never want to be proactive because they were so damn good at being reactive. So that said, if you know, you got to know from the ransomware people say, hey, I got your data and you can't do anything about it. I'm going to lock it up. So tell me how you react to them. Okay, you got the keys with the strength of the keys they're putting in place. Yeah, it's kind of hard to, even with NASA, NSA computers, to crack those keys. It's going to be challenging. And you realize that, you know, normal time is 21 days. Most businesses can sustain 21 days of being down. So those things have to occur. And that's where it comes from, why they're so successful with it. And so I'm gonna digress a little bit. You see my mind wanders. One of the dangers that we got a ransomware now is that, you know, it's more so that now it's got security as a service. So there's a group, and Mark mentioned APT events, persistent threats. Get hole in there, they wait for their time and they do whatever they want in your network to show who really runs your network. But that said, Dark Side is a team that has a software as a service. So we got cloud-based ransomware that's going. And, you know, it was interesting watching Dark Side come up because they said they would never touch nonprofits and some of these others, healthcare and things like that, because they had compassion to the human man and would never do that. Yeah, whatever. The service is being sold. So I need to come back now, rolling back in now. And you were talking about as far as for what you really should do if you get hit. Well, if you're in an active state, then unfortunately you should have been listening to awareness and being more proactive. You should have a plan in place. It should change from a security posture. If the X comes in, you're going to go to this Y book. If you don't have that Y book out there, that means you got to build it on. So that said, you probably want to, based on your size of your company, right? If you got some money, bring in somebody like a Mandrake or a CloudStrike or someone who has some expertise that can advise with you. So that way you won't make a lot of the stupid mistakes that others would make. But I mean, one of the always you can do, and I've seen it through my career, when something happened, we'll just shut down the networks. And then we'll figure it out and bring it on the side and see what the hell's going on and put our sniffers and watch traffic and see if we can observe anything. Or maybe we can fix that stuff and gradually bring back on. But again, you know, the ransomware is successful because they know that most businesses can't be out of business for their IT technology. So I'll go back and just say, hopefully, if you get anything from hearing this, start develop some type of plan. It's going to happen down the road. So plan for it now.
Yeah, and Mark, your thoughts on that? I know you have a lot when it comes around preparation and planning.
Yeah. So we actually do biweekly drills for it's not always ransomware. Sometimes it's APTs, the advanced persistent threats. Sometimes it's somebody popped a shell through our firewall, or a lot of what we do is ransomware based. We have about 10 different scenarios, and we varied a lot. So we drill, and I strongly recommend other teams start drilling. Even if all you have is a small, medium business, you got maybe 1 or 2 IT guys and no dedicated security, that's okay. Go ahead and start drilling. The second thing is an off-network isolated backup. There's no substitute for it. I have a small business that I work with over the last couple of weeks that got hit with ransomware, and their only backup was a 1 terabyte drive plugged into the computer. So when the server was hit, their backup was hit too, and it was very unfortunate for them because they thought they had a good backup. And I'm not picking on them. That's a pretty common, it's a pretty common thing. No, we're good. We have backup. You have backup, but your backups are also ransomware now too. So you have to have something separate, something air gap. There's like a complete separation between the server and whatever it is you're backing it up to, cloud or whatever.
So real quick, on that backup piece, I mean, because that's critical, right? Obviously, the size of your organization can dictate your backup strategy, right? But for the smaller organizations, as you mentioned, having a hard drive connected to a computer, external drive, that may be the best they can do, right? Other organizations may be limited on funds, right? So they may need 20 terabytes of storage to ensure they have X amount of days, months, or maybe even a year's worth of backups. But management says, hey, we only got money for 10 terabytes. So, you got to rotate every 2, maybe 4 weeks. How long of a retention and this goes out to both of you, what do you think is a good best practice as far as backup retention?
Yes. So kind of the standard, universal standard, you want to do a full complete backup once a week and then incremental backups every day. And then you want to do a lot of times you'll have like alternating tapes or something, not tapes. I guess we're a little past tapes now, but alternating drives of some kind every other month. For a small to medium business, what I advise this small business, it's 5, 7 employees. It's a little bit easier for them. I had advised them to move to Dropbox for their backup. I think it's $20 a month is what they pay for that. Pretty inexpensive. And then also take that 1 terabyte drive that they have, or 2 terabytes, whatever they're working with, and then once a month do a full backup, and then get a second 1 terabyte and alternate those. So January, they would back everything up to their first 1 terabyte drive. February, they would back up everything to their second terabyte drive. March, they would back it up back to the first one. So they would always be alternating. So there's never going to be a box more than 1 month old. And the reason why I recommend doing that is in order to back up to the same drive every month, you have to format it, right? Which means deleting everything. And I personally would not feel comfortable deleting everything right before a backup, because what if I have malware and don't know it? What if I've had malware for a couple of weeks now and didn't realize it? I need to be able to go back at least the last month or 2 months in some cases. Anything more than 2 months is probably going to be more complex than you really need to be, in my mind, unless you're an enterprise level business. Enterprise level business, whole different ball game there. But that's what I'd recommend for probably a smaller medium business.
All right, he left the enterprise stuff for you, Harrison.
I'm just gonna go still back to the same thing. It's all, most important thing is the plan. And with backups, Mark's dead on. There's different type of backup strategies that you're gonna have in place. You want to make sure you have some off-site backups. For as I mentioned, that a lot of people thought they had backups and didn't realize that whatever event occurred, they also corrupted what you thought were safe, secure backups. So there's something to be said about the off-site, and there's something said of going through different scenarios. That total testing, just going through and thinking through, just has so much value, especially when you're in a stressful situation. It won't be the first time, right?
Right.
Because we're all going to make mistakes, even after practice. Practice never makes perfect, gets you closer to it. But the more that you have with those scenarios where you review through them, the better off you're going to be. So that said, with your backups, make sure in your process that you at least have an opportunity to test your backups. There's nothing like being a safe, false sense of security that I got backups, I don't have to worry about it. And I go to my backups and realize, oh crap, we've been doing all this backup and this stuff doesn't work.
Right.
Operational processes, right, that you're going to always do stores and files and stuff from off tape for whatever business requirements. It's going to give you a way to test it, but but don't make the assumption that you just because your backups, those backups are good, unless you have something in your plan and it's testing those backups. So enterprise is why. So long story short, it's a plan. You just go through, you're going to do your pros and cons and say why you're doing that. As Mark mentioned, that there's an overlapping gap. What's the risk that you're willing to accept in that overlapping gap? If you don't want any gap risk, then your plan should document where those risks are and make sure that you're covered appropriately.
Yeah.
So I also kind of want to.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I wanted to interject something I did not mention in the beginning that I think is really important here. The same way that we do IR drills, we also, when I say we, I mean generically, like people, we should also be restoring from backup periodically, quarterly, biannually, annually, something. I completely agree with Mr. May there. When if you have a backup, you think it's working, you've been backing up for years. If you've never restored from backup, you don't have a backup. You have a philosophy. So it's really important to make sure that you actually restore from backup periodically, just to make sure it's configured correctly. And make sure all those things are ironed out. So
okay. Listening to you two and knowing a little bit about your backgrounds, let's kind of look at this from a people standpoint, right? So both of you are currently leaders of your teams. What do you think pieces of advice or things that you think management level or anyone who's managing a team of security engineers or specialists should keep in mind, in the midst of a ransomware attack, right? Because somebody kind of has to steer the ship, guide the, what I'm saying, lead the team. Do you guys have, anything that you like to share, or I don't know, thoughts or concepts or, philosophies on how you would lead your team when you're deep in it, right? When you're trying to recover from ransomware, any type of security event, what type of leadership advice could you give to those who may be listening and managing a security team of their own? Who would like to go first?
Sure, I have quite a bit to say on it. I didn't want to jump over Harrison there, but so first things first, when you do tabletop events, tabletop exercises, stuff like that, it really helps prepare you. So the more tabletops you can do and the more executive engagement you can get from the ground up, the better off you're going to be. One mistake that a lot of organizations make is they don't do any tabletops. The second problem they do is when they do them, they don't get executive engagement. It stops at the managerial level or maybe even director level, but CISOs and chief legal officers and marketing not officers, but marketing executives, people like that need to be involved too. You have to have that message of what you're going to craft prepared in advance. The other thing is, man, it sucks, and we're all in this together. And good, you really see good leadership come out in terse moments when because it's kind of an emotional event when you go through it. And KU have never been through one, fortunately, since I've been here. And but I have gone through it before when I was an engineer, and it's a painful process. It really is long days, man, 16-hour days for an extended period of time. Tempers flare. The better prepared you are, the more people know what to do, and the more clarity there is, the easier it is for everybody to to drive forward together, because it's a bad situation no matter how you slice it. So you can have people who excel just because they're naturally talented or naturally gifted, but more than anything, I would take a mediocre team who's well drilled over a couple of really gifted people who've never been in that position before. So drilling and planning and going through the tabletop exercise is so crucial to making sure that you keep a cool head and really get through it without people quitting and that kind of thing.
Yeah. All right, Harrison, leadership.
Yeah, Mark was dead on what he said, and it's good, a lot of good principles. That said, we start talking about people, process, and technology, right? Buzzwords that we kind of throw around in the whole industry about, what the business is all about. That said, the biggest thing that you need to have in advance, so you're not creating a rule book, playbook before it occurs. Mark said tabletop exercise, dead on. If you're not understanding what a tabletop exercise, that is just going through the scenarios and trying to figure out how you're going to work through it. It should be in everybody's. So the bigger the company, you're going to have your DR plan, and you got a recovery plan, right? A BC, a continuity plan, right? So in all those should have testing processes that you're going to have X frequency that you're going through. And why? Because you know the value that you can't do this stuff when you're under stress and start trying to vent what should be happening. So that's that bit. There's nothing like a technician when I'm trying to fix an issue, and I can't work because every time I tap a key, I got a management on my head. Okay, where we at? How long? When? So it's one of the things to have someone who's going to be that kind of gateway from the management level to keep them cool, that maintain that level headed, so your worker bees can do the work. So that's one of the big things that you in your plan is find out how you're going to conduct the flow into the people actually doing the working. Let the people work. You got an issue, let them work. Yes, we know as a management, you want to have information. One of the big steps to understand what the management level, most people will kind of that Peter principle. I won't go too far in that, but that said, there's a lot of managers that think they can't manage if they get a question asked them, they can't answer it. So these stressful things, they're getting above and they can't answer it. So they're with some of your biggest things. They start making stuff and putting pressures in place that, so going back to what Mark said, he's dead on. You need to prepare for this stuff. Everybody has their roles that you're going to handle events, and everybody has defined roles and what we're going to do. At the end of the day, protect the people who are doing the work.
Yeah.
In order to get the stuff up, they got to do the work. Then understand that management they need information, because it's all based on the organization. It can be the news media and all. Everyone's asking questions, and they need to be empowered with some type of knowledge of what's going on. They don't need to be in the weeds, but they need to have enough information to be knowledgeable. So that's part of your process. You need to make sure who is that gateway between the people doing the work and the people who are requesting the information of your status. You want to establish as you go into there in your tabletop, well, set up is what's needed. Do I need an hour review session? No, probably not. Maybe in the beginning, or it's a daily, quarterly, whatever. You start discussing. That's one of the first things you want to do at management level. Hey, communication problem, we're working on it. You will get X notice based on X time, based on X events. And then from your team, they understand when they need to let you know as far as their progress, because so I'm gonna stop there.
No, that was excellent. That's exactly what I was hoping for. And I personally didn't know much about tabletop exercises, but I could, based off what you two have explained, the importance is huge. That way everybody knows what to expect, expectations, level setting when it comes to the communication and, sharing of information. So I think the guys over at the Colonial Pipeline has had to go through some type of exercises like that for sure. They seem to have a pretty tight control over their situation, you know what I mean? Based on what we've read and what's been shared. But they took care of the media part. They figured out how to isolate the the threat internally. There's been disputes if they pay it or not. I don't know from what I've seen online, but it sounds like it's just all part of it. But the biggest takeaway I have is definitely be prepared. So anybody who's listening, organizations, if you're in the security space, or if you're not even in security and you're an executive trying to figure out how to keep bad things from happening, prepare. Start this interview.
I could put a comment on that, Aaron, because
yes,
don't mean my role. So that said, the pipeline, there's always been the utilities and all the SCADA stuff that those controls, those old PLC circuits and all that. That's old, antiquated. A lot of them still Windows 95 that we got all kind of vulnerability. So there's all kind of weakness in there. We're getting more aware as we go along that the importance of the cybersecurity framework being placed for our utilities. That said, it was great. I think that they had some lessons learned for some of the other previous experience in the last 5 years, because they didn't take long to start bringing in experts. It looked like they brought in management right away. And so they actually identified some of the actors that were associated with, they kind of tied it down and all that. So I think so you're seeing they had 7 days outages. The average is 21 for ransomware. So they cut a huge chunk, 30% time that it took them versus the other people to get the stuff back online back to what state, with they're starting to move all through it, but not totally up to capacity. So that said, long story short, yes, but that focus point, be prepared. And I think that you see from this story, there's a lot of, it's easy to look at the bad things out of the lessons, but you always you go back and look to see where you did good and where you did bad. One of the things they did good, they were prepared and they immediately brought in the experts. And you can see a lot of the things that occurred because they brought in experts.
And it's really best practice, and we have this too. I can't say with whom or how much, but we have an agreement with a local vendor where if we get in over our heads, our incident response team is so many people, but if we get in over our heads, we do have a local vendor who can kind of parachute in and be in under an hour. So that kind of, as part of your preparation strategy, we have consistent touch points with that specific vendor. We do purple team exercises with them, and we have an established relationship with them. We have a playbook that includes them too. So wanted to kind of mention that. That was a great call out there, Harrison, of having that preparation too, with maybe somebody else who can kind of expand and be an auxiliary to your team there.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I think this has been an awesome conversation. I know I personally gained a lot out of it. And I think we both applaud, the hard work that the folks over at the pipeline did to get the systems back online. Once they got the systems online, it seemed like they were able to kind of control really the whole team, control the media, control, the supply issues, and the state working with, I think there's some tax stuff going on. So, taxes were cut or suspended temporarily. I think overall, I think it was a great executed, team overall over there. So I definitely applaud them for that. So let's go ahead and end on that good note. Mark, I'll pick on you. Any parting words before we wrap up today's show?
Yeah, so two things really. Number one, it's really easy to look at Colonial or whoever. I mean, Scripps is also down for day 12 right now. Garmin's been hit. Lots of hospitals have been hit left and right. It's really easy to pick on them and say, yeah, you should have done better or whatever. I think more than anything, I think a lot of empathy and understanding that there's some people who make this their life mission to hit other people with ransomware. So there's a little bit of understanding of, man, this sucks. We're all in this together. I think we across the board in security need to try to up the bar and try to raise our level of execution and planning, and so that this stops happening. The other thing, though, is kind of to counterbalance that a little bit. Ransomware is not new. It's been going on for, I think it's been 5 or 6 years since my first time being hit with an organization that was hit with it. That was before we met at Cerner, but it's been around for a long time. So I want to express empathy for those who are going through ransomware, but I also want to say to the executives and managerial level, we're kind of getting at a point where, we got to raise that bar a little bit. 5 or 6 years is enough time to realize there's a threat coming and to plan for it accordingly. So, and it may sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth at the same time, but they're both true, they're both simultaneously true of, yeah, it sucks to go through it. So let's not pick on companies when they do go through it, like SolarWinds and FireEye and whoever else, because, let's try to help. But also, okay, executives and leaders of businesses, we got to get better prepared too. So,
nice. Harrison, parting words.
Yeah, I'm again. It's been a pleasure being here, and Mark, having this discussion with you. Great insight. A lot of things that you mentioned, I like to say dead on. I'm as a attaboy, right? Because you're saying the right things. My thing, I want to make sure that I want to make sure people are aware that if we got the old framework of putting all your controls at the perimeter to keep people out, you're wrong. Rethink, get a new security team, start thinking about the new cybersecurity framework, concentrate on the core functions. Okay, that's all based on the concept of zero trust. You don't even trust your people. It's just so easy to get stuff in between, in your environment. So as Mark mentioned earlier, purple teams, red teams, loading those different functionalities that you have in your security that's doing those core functions as protecting and as far as the prevention. And then once it happens, you're responding so you can recover. Those things you need to start having awareness that you need to concentrate your controls, not just protecting people out. They're in here. So since they're in here, one of the things that you have to make sure controls that response, and this is what we're talking about. How are you going to happen? It's going to happen. If you don't have a plan, what you're going to do for, you're behind the 8 ball, and you need to call out your security team as far as their framework. You need to get them understanding that every day you wake up, you're hacked. What are you going to do? It's not dry and doom. I don't want to do the FUD factor, fear, certain doubt. The security people. I build budgets over here. I built and got technology because I made people scared. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. I just want people awareness that it's a real danger out there, and that in order to best prepare yourself is just getting in that planning stage, in the mindset that you're have a zero trust model, that all your other controls that you have, your layer of defense are all great and they all have a place in your architecture. But at the end of the day, that the advanced necessity, if there's an enemy state that wants against you, now you're gonna get there. So the best thing you do is defeat you to detect and limit the damage when they get inside. So I'll stop from there, but that's the message that I would like to leave off, that people understand the importance of the zero trust model and what that means.
Okay, awesome. Very, very much appreciated. And I'm gonna pick on you a little bit more, Harrison. You mentioned the W.B. Du Bois Learning Center. I think it'd be a great opportunity to spend a minute or two to tell our viewing audience, about the W.B. Du Bois Learning Center, your role, and maybe some upcoming programs.
So now you're really dangerous, right? Because you know how I've already done
2 minutes.
Go on, right? All right. So W. Du Bois came to exist in 1973. An organization basically to help the community that I live is underserved to understand getting the skills in our community, which is the basic core fundamental reading and math, which is where 73 was started. In 1990, when the SX chips first came out, we got the Learning Center got 10 computers and wanted to put together a computer lab. I had at that same time was going back to get my degree, and went back to the Learning Center to get my matrix math up so I can get ready for my math classes. And Mr. Dixon came back, who's one of the co-founders, and let us know, hey, we got these 10 SX machines, what can we do with them? And so we put together a lab and started developing classes, teaching understanding. Now, right around that time, right, that was early 90s, and in 95, we rolled into the following net report, which is basically defining the visual divide. If you go back to the FCC report, originally called, there was going to be an issue with people falling through the net of internet, and you're seeing it. And with COVID and all that, you're really seeing it, that remarkable home school learning don't work if you don't have broadband to the home. Yeah, so my community doesn't have that. So that said, in 2000, Aaron, when we met, we put together a wireless infrastructure across Kansas City and utilized churches and community centers where we put point-to-point circuits and exposed the community to the technology. And that way we took people like you with expertise of how to do it, and we built it and deployed the solutions. What they call it cloud now. We just use Citrix, and we deployed desktops, published apps, and based on kids' performance growth, we gave them more apps as a candy store. So that's it. That is where we went. We went to a place, at that time we're talking about internet access was recurring costs of POTS lines, where now, the broadband capability is there. That said, it's still not in the community. So there is a project underway where we're starting to focus on the 3rd Street district, which is Vine. And the mission is to get skills in the community. This stuff is not hard. If you're talking about computers, it's just about binary operations. It's just on or off. So it's 2 options. So it's not hard at all, but you never exposed to it. It's a challenge. So that's what the Boys Learning Center is working with 4 pillars, being the STEAM Village and MOCAN, and then the UMKC, as far as for how we can strategize in our community so we can give skills to the community. I know I'm getting the last thing is, it's kind of like if you look at India, if you look at now when you see programmers and all these organizations are bringing in India for the resources of the program. If you think about how that occurred, right, at the turn of the 20th century, everyone was scared that the computers were going to break. We didn't know what was going to happen when the date flipped over with 4 digits. So that said, everybody had to update all their code and all their code and all that to make sure it's give it sense of comfort. And computer programmers were so high in the United States, $100 an hour, whatever, just a number out there, where they could go out to overseas to the India site, and then they can have for $12, $20 an hour writing code. And introduce the agile concept by telling them what they want. And then next day I come up in the morning, they had people developing a code and can look at it. Well, how did India get in that place? They had a constant effort to educate all of their kids and made it a requirement that they had to learn computer skills. That's what they did in the 80s to prepare them when they got to the turn of the century, such that now everybody's looking for your program is shot. You're going to see the minorities coming over H-154, whatever the form that we have, the foreigners from India are coming and doing programming and stuff like that. So that is one of the projects we're working on right now in our community. Why can't we get that passion in our community with our kids and give them learning? Why are we going over the premium emphasis? Are the other Indian companies that are doing all this program? But we got a pool of kids that are sitting there being wasted, and we read our newspaper about the challenge in there. How can we refocus that challenge and expose them to technology such that when we go in this caste system, I'm gonna stop. That's the challenge today's world. We got a caste system. We've asked other creators and producers, and we got the retainers, and then we got consumers. And the whole project is to keep this community from just being a consumer caste.
All right. Thank you. A lot of great information, though. But seriously, you and I will continue talking and bringing information, to the audience with things that are going on with the W.B. Du Bois Learning Center. So a lot of exciting things that, we talked about just as recently as yesterday. Tech in Motion folks, definitely stay tuned. With that, we're coming close to an hour. So I'll go ahead and end today's show. Again, thank you to Mr. Harrison May and Mark Bailey. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
This program is brought to you by Clark Star Group.